I'm really starting to wonder when these MAGA folks are going to wake up and realize that the Trump administration just thinks the American people are stupid. They will go out there and break the law, go against the Constitution, and because they have no respect for either of these things, and because they have absolutely no idea how the system is supposed to actually work, they just throw their hands up in the air and cry foul, as though the system is somehow being weaponized against them. And then they throw their chief propagandist out in front of the world so she can start putting out all of the fires that the Trump administration has just started. And this was on full display when Karoline Leavitt gave a press briefing after the Trump administration blatantly defied a court order to turn immigration flights around because the Trump administration was invoking wartime powers to start deporting hundreds of undocumented immigrants without due process. So let's go ahead and take a look at this press briefing because there is just such an utter contempt for the American people or the reporters in the room. I don't know what is going on, but this is kind of the vibe we get from Karoline Leavitt at nearly every single appearance. So let's go ahead and take a look at this first question. She's asked about whether or not the due process is something that the Trump administration is concerned with. If you guys do appreciate my work, please do remember to subscribe.
What do you say to Americans who want safe streets but are concerned due process is being violated?
The president is using every lever of his executive authority and his constitutional authority within the bounds of the immigration laws of our country to ensure that our streets are safer for law-abiding American citizens. And this administration is focused on detaining, arresting, and deporting illegal criminal aliens. And as you saw this past weekend, the president used his authority under the Alien Enemies Act to deport foreign terrorists. Tren de Aragua is now a designated foreign terrorist organization. And as I said, there were nearly 200 Tren de Aragua members who were sent to El Salvador this weekend. Countless lives will be saved because of this action. And if you talk to the families, the Angel families, as I mentioned, Blake and Riley and Jocelyn Nungray, they understand the grave cost of life at the hands of these illegal terrorists. And the president is proud to deliver on that promise for them.
So do you notice how she didn't really address the question at all? Instead, she's saying, well, the administration is focused on arresting and detaining and deporting, and they're terrorists, so that is what the administration is focused on, so we don't really care about the due process rights. That's kind of how I'm reading this, because as we know, the Trump administration would prefer to act in an authoritarian type way, and therefore, due process rights wouldn't matter at all. But as we discussed in a previous video, due process is so important. If the Trump administration is just allowed to accuse somebody of being in a gang and then use that as a pretense to get them out of the country, what's to say they won't violate the due process rights of people who are down the street protesting Tesla dealerships? I mean, this is a slippery, slippery slope, and that the administration is showing no care at all should be quite concerning to everyone. She is then asked whether or not the administration is comfortable turning over all of the documents that the judge is requesting.
Is the administration prepared to give the court what it wants in terms of the time of the flights that departed, that went to El Salvador, and some of those details that the judge is asking for in trying to determine the timing? Clearly, the 5 named individuals were not deported.
That's right.
Compliance. But looking more broadly, wanting to know about the timing of flights and so forth, because the verbal order did say turn around the flights if there's an issue. So is the administration prepared to provide that information?
I'm prepared to provide it right now. All of the planes that were subject to the written order, the judge's written order, took off before the order was entered in the courtroom on Saturday. And the administration will, of course, be happily answering all of those questions that the judge poses in court later today.
Okay. I included this clip because this is important. Because I have the hindsight, or the knowledge of knowing that the Trump administration did go into court, and instead of providing all the documents that this lady is asking about, they just stonewalled the judge. They said, oh, well, it's a matter of national security, and therefore we can't turn over this, we can't turn over that. And the judge was so pissed off that they have to schedule another hearing for today, I believe it is. It is just absolutely absurd for Karoline Leavitt to stand up in front of the briefing room saying, well, I can provide it right now. When that's not what the question was asked. We're talking about documents that would prove the Trump administration didn't know about the court order, didn't know about the verbal order, or what? You need to prove the timeline. You need to prove who these people are. But that is not what the Trump administration seems like they are going to do. She is then asked how the Trump administration is proving that these people are actually gang members.
Thanks, Caroline. Just to follow up on that, then, so you're saying definitively that the administration can prove everyone that was put on those flights in El Salvador was either a member of Tren de Aragua, MS-13, or some other entity?
We've already provided the breakdown in the effort of transparency about the 261 illegal aliens who were deported. 137 of those were deported under the Alien Enemies Act. 101 of those were Venezuelans removed via Title VIII, which, as you know, are just regular immigration proceedings. And 23 of them were MS-13 Salvadorian gang members. There were also 2 MS-13 ringleaders as part of that group of 23 who President Bukele particularly expressed his gratitude for their return so he can demand justice in his home country.
Okay, she did not answer the question. You guys are able to prove that all of these people you accuse of being in TDA are actually part of TDA? And instead of answering the question, she gives a breakdown of, okay, well, we have these types of immigrants and these types of immigrants and these types of immigrants. But she's not really telling us how they proved that these people are actually part of a gang. And as of now, there has been no evidence to substantiate that any of these people are in a gang. I'm sure a few of them are, but the Trump administration has not provided any evidence for that actually being the case. This is very, very troubling because what is going on here is the Trump administration can just accuse somebody of being part of the Tren de Aragua gang, and then all of a sudden they find themselves on a plane to El Salvador. So they then go on to ask again, well, how are you identifying these gang members?
Well, what criteria, though, other than, say, tattoos or maybe being in the wrong place at the wrong time, are they using to determine that someone is actually a member of one of these organizations?
Intelligence and the men and women on the ground in the interior of our country who are finally being allowed to do their jobs. Their hands were tied under the previous administration, and as I said, they take their jobs very seriously. They should be trusted and respected by the American public with this operation. And of course, as I said to Kelly, the administration will provide all details to the questions that the court poses.
Intelligence. We have intelligence. And you should trust this administration to do their job because they're putting their life on the line to arrest all of these different gang members. I mean, what a load of shit. I wouldn't trust this administration to do absolutely anything. They have proven that they aren't interested in following our rules, our laws, our norms. They aren't interested in adhering to the Constitution. They aren't interested in adhering to a court order and instead will try to play a game like they were over international waters and therefore the court order didn't apply to us. Why the hell would I trust anything that this administration says? I do not trust that they can properly identify these gang members by just looking at them. And if you aren't going to provide any, details or any evidence to prove that your system is working to actually identify these gang members, then I don't want to hear it. I mean, these people are absolute clowns. Leavitt is then asked about whether or not this administration is going to be respecting verbal orders versus written orders.
You keep talking about the judge's written order, which hit the docket Saturday night at about 7:26 p.m., but he issued a verbal order before that at about 6:45 and 6:48 p.m. based on the court hearing, a verbal order from the the bench. Does the White House feel the need to comply with a verbal order from this judge?
Again, as I said, all of the planes subject to the written order of this judge departed U.S. soil, U.S. territory before the judge's written order.
But what about the verbal order, which of course carries the same legal weight as a written order, and said for the planes to turn around if they were
Well,
in the air?
there's actually questions about whether a verbal order carries the same weight as a legal order, as a written order, and our lawyers are determined to ask and answer those questions in court.
So do you notice how she's choosing her language very carefully there? All of the deportations are subject to the written order, but Caitlin Collins is specifically asking about the verbal order. Because when they were in court, the judge said, you need to get a hold of your people and you need to tell them to turn that flight around because we are temporarily pausing these deportations because it appears to be unlawful. And any other time, these verbal orders from a judge carry the same weight as a written order. So the Trump administration is just trying to play games, trying to see what they can get away with in the federal court system. And then if they don't want to play by the rules, well, then we're going to start asking questions about whether or not their verbal orders carry any weight at all. This is a tried and true tactic from this Trump administration. If they don't like a rule, they'll try to obfuscate and try to talk about something else. And then if they are pinned down on it, then they start to question whether the law or the rule or the norm is actually worth anything at all. These people are absolutely despicable. They have absolutely no respect for our system, for our institutions, for our rule of law, and they are proving it every single day. It is absolutely insane to me. And then there's just one last question. It's really funny because Tom Homan went out and said that, we don't care what the judge says. We were over international waters, and when we're outside the borders, it is what it is. So Karoline Leavitt is asked about that. Here's how she responds.
Tom Homan, he was on Fox News.
We love Tom Homan.
And he was talking about the deportations, and he said the following. He said, we're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think, which seems to me, just reading that, that you don't care what orders come from the federal bench. Is that the case? Can you clarify that, please?
Well, I think since you just quoted Tom, I'll quote Tom. He said, I don't care what the judges think, but I can assure you that the administration is complying with the court order. And as I've said repeatedly from this podium, all of the flights that were subject to the judge's written order departed before the written order, and we are prepared to make that case in court later this afternoon.
There it is again, that very specific language. We were following the written order. And then she goes on to say, we are following the order, but we just know that that is not true. The Trump administration has since come out and said, we made a calculated decision to go ahead and continue on with the deportations. So Karoline Leavitt is just lying to you. And she's hoping that the rest of the American people do not understand what this Trump administration is actually trying to get away with. We have a president who is invoking wartime powers to try to strip due process rights away from people who have only been accused of being in a gang. That is what is happening right now. And when a judge told them to stop, they said, nah, we're going to go ahead and do it our way anyway. So these people continue to lie to the rest of America. They continue to push the boundaries of what they are able to get away with. They continue to lever tax against any federal judge that tries to uphold the rule of law. And then they put Karoline Leavitt out there to put out all of these fires after this shit show of administration is just breaking rules all over the place. It is an absolute disgrace. And it is my hope that the American people will finally start to wake up and realize that we are barreling towards another constitutional crisis because this administration doesn't want to be accountable to anyone. They don't care about the laws. They don't care about the Constitution. Donald Trump wants to be able to say, hey, you go do that thing, and then that thing gets done. But that is just not how our system is supposed to work. Due process is important, and it's important that we stand up for it, even when it might be violent gang members who might be deported. Because if we can't stand up for it, then how am I supposed to trust that this administration isn't going to stand up for it later down the road when somebody is protesting against Elon Musk and Tesla, and Donald Trump goes on an unhinged rant and, criminalizes that as well. So I will leave it there for now, guys. If you guys got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. We've got to build something here on the left that can adequately push back against this right-wing media ecosystem and all of this brain rot that exists in this MAGA world. So if you do like what I do here, please do remember to subscribe. It is free. And if you want to get a better breakdown of how the Trump went about deporting a whole bunch of people without their due process rights, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.